Okay, great. I'd like to welcome everyone to the regular monthly meeting of the Transportation Advisory Board. My name is Cynthia Kress. I'm currently serving as chair. And we will start off by approving the minutes. I'm seeking approval of the November minutes by unanimous consent as presented. I'm not hearing any objections, so the minutes are approved as presented. That brings us right to public comment. Do we have, I see at least one person on the line. Do we have any? I see Connie has public comment. She should go ahead, right? Do you need to upgrade her or anything, or are you on here?
I unmuted her.
Okay.
I am unmuted. Hi, I'm Connie Marsh, and I sent you an email, but I learned from last time that life goes fast and the emails are hard to get under the belt. So I'm going to do a little refresher and read the packet again. Appreciate the decreasing impervious surface, but am still concerned about changes from the Central Issaquah Plan standards that actually show that street parking is optional in some of their street typologies, but they are being presented in this as if they are sort of mandated with a caveat, right? I am a little concerned with the chart that talks about how these street typologies are aligning themselves with city goals, where I see there's a bunch of city perspectives that are missing in that, and that would be like the climate action plan, environmental, etc. Right? So I think that this needs to be broadened out to consider those perspectives, because frankly, the environment is a big deal, especially the trees. So my example was that the new Title 18 code is actually allowing right-of-way projects to reach into parkland and take down park trees with no stated notice to parks. And I don't think that this is the correct way to go about such things. And I think that there needs to be community comment on items that will impact the quality of life in the community, which brings me to my next long-term situation, which we have these street typologies and then we change them. And so without understanding how and when these can be changed, what the criteria are, and what the process, public process is, so that everyone understands how and when these can be changed, and what can and cannot be value engineered out, then you don't really understand when you're going to be able to get these road typologies. And so I realize you have to at least lay out the typologies, but I think before you approve such a thing, you also need to understand how and when they then can be changed. I believe you do have a notice in there saying, and this is subject to how it fits into the environment, right? And so then I saw papers being handed out, which always makes me nervous because that always seems like new information that I wouldn't have seen, so I can't comment on it. So if you wouldn't mind saying what the papers were, if they're new information that was put out and it wasn't something that was reflected in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. I'll just say real quick, this is Cynthia, and that is that they are just printouts of some of the packet, and that was at our request because we're trying not to bring our computers now that we're meeting in person again and bring the focus back to talking to people face to face. And so we were feeling like we were lacking some of those reference materials that came from the packet. So it's just the same stuff. But I appreciate the comment, and we will try to make sure that anything that does get passed out as we're getting used to this hybrid world, if there were to be anything that was new, to make sure that that's as transparent as possible and called out. So thank you. Let's see, that brings us to regular business. I believe there's no one else on the line ready to make comments. Let's see anybody else in the back here. So with that, I turn it over to Thomas, who's going to give a presentation. And I'll just say real quick before, I do want to thank you for your patience. I think this, I'm looking forward to the discussion tonight. I think we are have the presentation and the materials presented in a way that I think we can dive right into the substantive material. So I'm happy about that. So I just wanted to start by saying that. So thank you for your patience and your diligence on that. I think we'll see how it all does tonight, but I think it will definitely pay off. So with that, I turn it over to you, Thomas.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I am trying to figure out my camera. Give me 1 second. All right. All right, I will begin. Oh, yeah, okay. I'll begin here. So again, yeah, my name is Thomas Valdrez. I'm the city's senior transportation planner. And if you have not noticed, my voice is a little hoarse from something that I picked up this past week. So I'm going to do my best to get through this presentation. Definitely feel free to stop me if you can't understand what I'm saying, but I might take some breaks to take a sip of water as I go through this. So yeah, thanks in advance for your consideration. And tonight I'll be going through the administration's proposal to introduce a set of citywide street typologies, and then I'll ask for the board's feedback as I go through. I'll then end my presentation with a preview of what's coming next. So before I begin, I just wanted to pause here and share with you the one question, the primary question that we're hoping to get feedback on from the board. So that question is, which of the 3 typology alternatives does the board recommend? And I'll just be asking why that is. So as I go through this, just keep that in mind. This will be much clearer. So at the November TAB meeting, I had mentioned that the goal of this update was to essentially clean up existing requirements and create cohesion between several planning documents that have been sort of bolted on over the last decade or so. So as you put them all together, these planning documents, as described in attachment B, they all can contain inconsistencies, lots of vague requirements, and when it actually gets down to it, it actually causes a lot of confusion in practice. So when trying to figure out, what is actually required on the street, we really wanted to make it clearer, make sure that all the inconsistencies were taken care of, and just really trying to clean up a lot of the issues from about a decade of planning documents. So again, the aim here is to ensure that our multimodal goals are incorporated into how streets are designed, and to make sure that it's really clear what is required from developers when the city is making improvements, what is required, what we should be doing. And so when a street needs to be built or redesigned, we also want to provide some flexibility, because we can't tell all conditions of what a street will look like. So we're really providing a framework based on local context. So one of the questions that the TAB had asked at the last meeting was, when are these improvements actually being made? And so again, the goal of designing these typologies is to make it clear, how streets should be designed relative to our mobility goals. And this, with this literal roadmap that we're creating, we're going to, show how streets should look and feel. New development, when it comes into the community, will be asked to chip in for these improvements. And these improvements would be made to just streets that are adjacent to property that's being developed. So, in practice, these improvements typically mean things like sidewalk, street trees. Sometimes it can mean dedicating land to the public right-of-way to create a future street. These are just some examples of improvements that could be required with development. And these improvements really come in a piecemeal way. So we can't tell the future of when development comes, but you know, as it does come, we will have a roadmap that describes how we want things built, so that when development does come our way, or when the city does capital improvement projects, things will be designed for that spec. So with that background, I'll just begin diving into the typologies, which I introduced in November. And so here we have 3 context-specific street designs that were developed as part of this project. So the first one is a core street. Core streets are applicable to medium and high-density mixed-use commercial areas. Parkways are applicable, and that's that green one. Parkways are applicable to roadways that are intended to serve connections between communities and interstates or freeways. And slow streets are applicable to residential and quiet business districts. And a detailed description of all these can be found in attachment E, which is printed out for you today. And so this map visualizes the extent of the street designs that would be applicable to each of the streets. Again, this is an attachment E. I believe it's on page 3 of your packet. All the other streets that are not designed with the typology would be represented in the other groups. So these would be the corridor-specific streets, which are shown in purple. And these streets are where pre-existing corridor-specific plans have been developed over the years. And just for a little bit of background, this sort of encapsulates a lot of the central Issaquah parkways that were in attachment A. Functional classification streets, these sort of represent the default street design for all streets that are not assigned a typology nor within the corridor-specific street type. So that's just a little bit of background as to what this map is showing.
Thomas, we got a question over here.
Yeah, great.
I have 2 questions. One, Westlake Sandwich Parkway, it goes from corridor specific to core street, but the street, I mean, it's the same street. If you're traveling on the purple portion, you're also going to be traveling on the blue portion. So other than, you know, slowing traffic down, is there some other reason to do a transition when, like, if you're on that road, you're going on that road the whole way, there's very little stuff you'd be turning off to get into or get to around that area?
Yeah, the root of that is really the land use does change in that area. So as it transitions to blue, it becomes more of a commercial, at least on the south side of the street. And so that really, does that make sense?
Okay, I mean, I guess that makes sense. I'm just thinking about why the transition doesn't happen where the majority of traffic starts diverting to different paths. Right? Most traffic there goes left or right, a little bit straight. There's very little traffic to like a gas station, hotel, and like an IHOP or something. There's very little traffic that goes in and out of there. So it just seems like an odd place to have a transition. But I guess I heard your answer, so I'm not gonna go on more on that point. I did have a question though, just like for a reference, is there something that specifies, you say functional classification, you said this is the default. Is there something that specifies what would be the comparative information for the default? Like if we're looking at parkways, what's that relative to the default?
Yeah, so that would be found within the Public Works street standards. That is what defines each of the functional classifications.
Can you say that again, please?
Yeah,
For
sorry.
what?
So, and I'll provide a little bit more information. So the functional classification is something that is the city works with you know, Washington State. So Washington State and the city have all these roads that are defined as different classifications. And the actual design, like the cross section, sort of like what we have here, with the other street typologies where we show like the actual widths of each of the facilities, like the width of the drive aisle, the width of the sidewalk, all those like little details, those are all within the Public Works street standards, which is the document that this street typologies will jump into.
So I have a question. When you say develop, are you meaning what's there existing now?
Well, they just listed as, there's 5 categorizations here on this layered map. And we have, we're looking at options for 3 of those. So I was just wondering, just for my reference, and I don't know, maybe it's beneficial for others, to see, like, as we're looking at, since this is actually the minority of, it looks like minority of overall streets, when we're looking at these 3 different options for the parkways, how does that compare to the functional classification roads or the corridor specific plan? Mostly as a point of reference, since we're not looking at changes to that, it could be helpful to understand these changes relative to it.
Yeah, my intention was to try to not overload with too much information, but yeah, I can say that the information that you're asking for is found in the Public Works street standards, and all of these proposals that we have in front of you, and I believe there's a map in attachment E that sort of talks about the differences in right-of-way askings. They, for the most part, they all fit with what is given. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Chair, is it okay if I continue?
Please, sorry.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's see. Great, so yeah, since the TAB's last meeting, the administration has developed 3 alternatives for the TAB to consider. And so those, again, those alternatives are again provided as attachment E. So these alternatives show typical sections of a roadway that are meant to provide flexibility in design. So the first alternative that I'll briefly describe is the Central Issaquah standard. And so this represents the least amount of change in design. And so under this scenario, the Central Issaquah standards would remain with only minor adjustments that would be made to, again, add clarity, consistency, and cohesion. The second alternative represents an incremental change on top of what's already required under the first alternative. So the second alternative, we've re-examined how the right-of-way design has been developed over the last 10 years. We reconsider how we can promote our existing multimodal goals, and both now and then moving forward. So this sort of represents just a mixing around of the existing right-of-way width under alternative 1. Overall, this alternative provides more design emphasis on sustainable transportation modes, such as walking, biking, and transit within the Central Issaquah area specifically. And then without requiring any sort of additional right-of-way width that would lead to reductions in developable private land. And then the last one is the third and final alternative, which we're hoping to get your feedback on. So this is essentially the widening alternative, and it would represent a incremental addition to the second alternative. This one seeks to strategically add additional right-of-way in order to achieve a more multimodal street network than what we currently have today. So all these alternatives differ from each other, and so I'll now walk you through one by one, beginning with the core streets. So again, this is the core street. One of the things that the tab had asked for previously was some, concrete examples. So here I have for you an example of what a future core street looks like now. And so this is Northwest Maple Street between Gilman and Newport Way. So on the right here, we see Target and the Issaquah Commons Shopping Center. So currently the road has landscaping, and I'll use my cursor here. So it has landscaping and other amenities to the right of the sidewalk. And there's actually, there's no bike lane currently. The travel lanes we measured are about 12 feet wide, which is pretty wide. It's actually much more than a passenger vehicle actually needs, as you can see here. And so in the event that Issaquah Commons Shopping Center came to the city and wanted to redevelop this parcel over here, the city could then ask them to chip in for improvements on Northwest Maple Street based on the core street design. And this is just an example design here. So the core street would, again, provide a more comfortable cyclist experience, providing a bike lane. It would also support better access to transit and then other just general amenities here. So I will just quickly walk through the 3 alternatives for the core street, and I'll ask for your feedback shortly after that. So the first alternative, again, is the this carries forward the Central Issaquah Street design standards. And so we've just redid what the Central Issaquah design looked like using this software. And so this design provides wide sidewalks and landscaping. Landscaping between parked vehicles, which are here on either side. Cyclists are provided a bike lane located between parked cars and the travel lane. So in general, as a general note, while there's a lot of good features to this design, the negatives are that essentially it's pretty uncomfortable for cyclists to be between a parked car. We kind of call this the door zone. If somebody's opening their door, you could potentially hit a cyclist. The bike lane itself is an adequate width, but again, it's sort of an uncomfortable situation that potentially could deter many would-be cyclists from, riding on this road. The width of the driveway is adequate for vehicles, like a typical passenger vehicle, but a 10-foot wide travel lane might be a little small for a larger vehicle such as a bus. So that's sort of one of the trade-offs, is that it might be a little difficult to get a bus in there. In contrast, alternative 2 seeks to improve on the Central Issaquah plan by addressing the deficiencies that I just mentioned. So in this design, we again are providing wide sidewalks, but we're moving the bike lanes in this alternative adjacent to the sidewalks and between a buffered landscape area. So the bike lane would be grade separated, meaning that the bike lane is actually going to be lower than the sidewalk. So there's some good separation there between pedestrians and cyclists. Landscaping and other amenities are provided again to the left of the cyclist. And so one of the key issues in the first alternative was that wider vehicles may not be able to navigate through a 10-foot wide travel lane. And so to get around this, one of the issues with widening a road is that you actually, by widening the road, you incentivize, going faster. It actually becomes more comfortable to drive your car faster in a wider lane. And so without increasing the actual width of the road, we're proposing a painted median, which would then accommodate larger vehicles such as buses to get through here. So if a bus can't make it in that 10-foot area, they could just slightly hug the median, which is, it really balances out the street, and it also provides a good amount of space between parked vehicles and the traveling car. So again, it's more comfortable for those who are parking. It's more comfortable for larger vehicles such as buses, without actually increasing the design speed of the road. So we feel that this is an improvement on the first alternative. And it really sort of, again, makes it more accommodating for all roadway users, which is one of the goals of the mobility master plan, is to have a very complete street. So in summary, alternative 2 is the preferred alternative by the administration. And this third option, which is essentially the widening option again, this would widen the roadway by about 4 feet. The widening is really to provide more space and really ample space for all users. But again, the net result is that it reduces development potentially on private properties. And last thing I will just say, when you do widen the roadway, so like this 11-foot lane right here, it would potentially, again, increase the design speed of the road, especially when buses are not present. So I will now pause here. I'll take additional questions. I see a couple, and then I'll ask for TAB's feedback on the preferred alternative.
Why don't you go ahead, Tom?
So Mike had a sentence first.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just trying to be.
This is Tom McDonald, and a couple of comments I have is on the 10-foot lanes, not so much on 11-foot lanes, but the intersections may have to be larger, primarily for the turning radius of tracking of tractor trailer trucks to be able to turn from one straight 90 degrees to the other, turning from one straight 90 degrees onto the other straight, to be able to have the tracking of the back tires of the trailer be able to fit into such a narrow lane on the other side. I think that's probably more of an issue with a 10-foot lane than with an 11-foot lane, although not much. So one concern is once you start widening the intersections, you can have longer clear times. So that adds a little bit more potential overall delay at the intersection. And then also the overall width seems to be quite large, looking at 74 feet over right away from one building to the other building. So that the historically usually 60-foot right away blocked a lot of streets when they were put in. So it seems like there would be a fair bit of right away that would be versus some areas, unless that's what we have the developer dedicate some of that land in front of whatever the development might be, the developing that's along that stretch of road for basically donating that land to the complete street with. And then also I assume that the intersections, for example, in these diagrams where there's no center turn lane, is that the parking lane would end, and you would then take that space to widen out the 2-lane boom out, so you could create a left turn lane.
Is that a question?
I guess it's a question, yes. Is my assumption correct, is that you would basically have to end the parking anywhere from 100 feet to 300 feet from an intersection, so that you would be able to have enough space to go out the lanes and create a left turn turning lane.
So I think I might have to rely on John Mortensen here, but just as a general statement, this design here that I'm showing, this represents sort of like the middle of an intersection. So this would be like the straightaway, if you will. So any sort of like additional features of the road that are, one would be designing for, they wouldn't necessarily be encapsulated in this little diagram.
I mean, with one lane being 12 foot and an 8-foot parking, if you got rid of parking on both sides, you could have a left turn lane, and you would actually have a little bit more receiving lane for a truck turning movement into it before you narrow it back down to a 10-foot lane also.
Yeah, and I would say that the intersections would have to be specifically designed and where to stop the parking, where to add the turn lane. And that would be outside of what we're trying to do with the typologies, but something that we would consider.
It also kind of comes into play the classification for the cross streets too, on whether or not it is more principal versus a smaller arterial street, whether it needs that wider width. But you're correct in terms of you would end the parking a certain distance from the intersection, and you would get that wider space for consideration of movement of tractors or larger vehicles.
I think balancing that would be, I'm not sure if the plan is also when you get to an intersection, we try and have bulb out so that you have a shorter crossing distance for pedestrians crossing over.
Yeah, and then those are typically designed so that you can get the shorter crossing distances, but it's still accommodating the wider vehicle turning movements.
So I want to come back to this when we get into our discussion, but I do think that even though it's outside the scope, I would like to see captured some of the concerns that we might have, that selecting one alternative or recommending one alternative or another might then develop at intersections. I think it would be nice to capture the concerns about, because I have a concern about another one of the alternatives on that too. So when we get to that discussion, even though it's outside the scope, I think it would be good to capture any concern that we want to be considered then at the intersections, have that documented for future. Micah, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One, I noticed for core streets, the widening option is a 6-foot bike lane. For all of the parkway options that have the street level bike lane, including the widening option, they have a 5-foot. And I guess I'm a little surprised that, granted, I do not like to commute, so I don't know. I'm asking this as a question. I'm a little surprised that on a core street, which is a lower speed, there's an option for a wider bike lane than any of the parkways. It just seemed a little odd. And then I also noticed, I assume, certainly for us humans, we're going to see red as that's a bad thing, as a con. I assume that's what's meant here. I find it a little interesting that autos, a higher street design travel speed is listed solely as a con. I think that there are certainly pros to that. I do have some concerns about narrower streets, even if we say universally it is a pro, and I personally would not say this, but if it is a thing that universally it's better to have slower streets, there is a pretty big psychological impact or stress from driving on a narrow street. I know a lot of people don't feel comfortable on narrow streets. So I do have concerns with any level of, narrow street being listed as only a pro and wide street as only a con. Also, just looking between the option 2 and option 3, it seems like if we said, well, the bike lane width at 5 feet seems fine for all of the parkway options where it's at street level, then really what we're doing is we're saying, well, it's a 6-foot landscaping instead of 5, and then we're painting a foot of the street instead of having it be open. So it's a pretty actually minor difference, I think, when it comes down to it. So I'm kind of mostly interested then in when those painted, 1 foot is when that's used. Does it work well? I mean, is it effective in its purpose, or do people treat it as just a wider street?
Yeah, I can answer that. So the painting a buffer lane is it's a national best practice. It's something that we pulled from, it's called NACTO Green Book. So it is the well-established method for handling these types of situations. So we think that this is a really good application. It's something that you see like in in a textbook as being like a really good option. But like, it's really cool to see it like this could actually work really well for this type of situation.
Did you ever hand up this?
Let Jerry go ahead. I had a comment to make.
Sorry, I didn't see you, Jerry. Did you? So I'm sorry, let's just say, there's one thing, what I want to do is, I would love for us to discuss our feelings about the options together. I want to start that discussion in just a moment, but let's get our questions to staff out of the way, and then let's turn our attention to having the discussion about what we think is that we want to recommend. So, go ahead.
Just to clarify from Michael, were those 3 questions or 2 comments and a question?
They were all questions.
Okay.
Jerry, did you have a question for staff?
Yes, I was curious as to why not have a 4-foot landscaping strip and what's, and why not always have just a 5-foot landscaping strip? Because, all the, one of the big differences between option 3 and option 2 is the landscaping strip, which is only a 1-foot difference, and it's kind of like the same thing with the bike lane also. I mean, why are, if a 5-foot bike lane is safe enough, why aren't we going with a 5-foot bike lane? And if a 5-foot landscaping strip is good enough, why not just always go with the 5-foot landscaping strip? And I'm just wondering where those dimensions came from.
Yeah, that's a great question. So 5 foot is really that is the recommended width for our maintenance, like landscaping folks. A tree really needs a lot of space, so 5 foot is really like the recommended width for a tree. Go lower, but it wouldn't really accommodate a tree, which is sort of like what we typically would be installing on this type of area.
Okay.
Did I answer your entire question, Jerry?
That was the landscape, and then the bike lane.
Right. And again, yeah, so a 5 foot bike lane is the recommended minimum that we have throughout the city. So 6 foot is more comfortable, but 5 foot is really sort of a standalone. 5 foot is the minimum recommended.
Okay,
Yes, that's-
and then one more comment real quick. And that was about the trees and visibility when trees are planted. So maybe they're just not planted at intersections, but.
No, they wouldn't be.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, one thing I did want to add for the trees is when we do narrow it up, the trees start causing damage to the, whether it's sidewalk or a bike lane or the curb. And that's the concern with narrowing the landscape strip and trying to put trees there is because
In
a
a
lot of
4-foot
damage.
strip,
Yes.
that's not gonna work, but a
Right.
5-foot would, but it depends upon what you plant too.
Yes.
Right.
Because historically in this well, when we've had 4-foot width strips with trees, the trees don't last long, or they fall over, or there's a higher risk of them getting pulled out in a storm or something like that. So the recommended width, minimum width is 5 feet.
There's some questions over here, but I want to make sure Jerry finishes it, and it sounds like you have something directly related to this.
Yes,
You're trying to
directly
say.
related to what you were
So
saying.
Jerry and then Micah, go ahead and finish, and then we'll come back over here.
Yeah, that's fine, but so I didn't know that Issaquah is standard for the planting strip for trees. So that it's, because you could have lower things planted too that aren't necessarily trees, right? And then, but is that a Issaquah standard?
So yeah, I guess the idea is that like on this snapshot, there are trees here that are requiring of a 5 foot width. It's not to say that we always install trees, but if we have our preference, and this is sort of the design that we're carrying forward through Central Issaquah, is we have a 5 foot area that is for landscaping, and trees are sort of what we love in this city. We love trees, so that is what we're proposing. Yeah.
So to follow up with the tree width question, is there a cost difference, a meaningful cost difference in maintenance for a 5 foot or 6 foot, like, you know, I presume there could be issues with roots disrupting the concrete and like, so is there a meaningful difference that we should actually be considering as well?
Between 5 feet and 6 feet, 6 feet is always going to create a healthier tree, but we do have new requirements for tree installations that prevent it lifting sidewalks now. That's something that we didn't previously.
So cost-wise for maintenance, we shouldn't.
Cost-wise, it doesn't really make a difference. The biggest difference is really just the amount of concrete going into the wider roadways when you're considering the wider.
Got it. And so then just one really quick thing, you mentioned more comfortable experience for bikes, more comfortable experience for transit, but yet narrower is better for cars. When almost everyone drives a car, it seems like comfort should at least be considered a positive.
Well, it's also a consideration of safety too, when you're going with the narrow width for cars. When you get the narrow width, yes, it makes all the drivers uncomfortable, but it also creates statistically a safer space. You get a lower instance of collisions, lower instance of people going higher speeds first, and that creates a more comfortable space for everybody else. And so that's kind of the give and take with these conversations. When we wanted complete streets and the TAB wanted to push for more comfortable spaces for everybody, there is a give and take in terms of like, not everybody's going to be comfortable. So that's kind of the consideration with going to wider widths.
And I think when we get to the discussion, I have something to say about that too. Just some back and forth about that concept. Did you guys have questions for staff? I saw some arms up here.
I think this got clarified. I did not, when I was looking at this, I was not even thinking about intersections. So that isn't factoring into the decision we're making tonight, though.
That's correct, because whether despite the options you choose, the intersections will get designed around that. That's something that'll become after this project. It's just kind of outside of the scope. Right now, we're just trying to update what is the typologies at this point.
So I'm curious, this is where it sort of intersects with urban design. The core streets are going to be the areas where there's mixed use and highest density. And I think several of the ground floor retail restaurant environments would want to have on curb seating areas where they're out in the right of way. How does that factor into these core recommendations? Because we're looking at a complete street here, and then there's a great separation between the bikes and peds, which I like, but then what happens on the development side in terms of interacting in space where people also.
The typologies didn't really take into account, and that was even in the consideration when Central Issaquah plan was developed. It didn't take into account the sidewalk cafes or those spaces. That was going to be another consideration when the land use finally gets developed. This is more considering the thoroughfares for walking, biking, and driving and taking transit, more of how everybody's getting around and the interaction with the land use. But for taking into account sidewalk cafes, usually that is part of specific areas for the city too. It's not just every street that goes in. So there will be specific areas of the city that is going to be wanting wider sidewalks to allow sidewalk cafes.
I think, well, when the Central Issaquah plan was done, and I don't know if this was introduced or addressed in the Title 18 that's being updated, but the big focus on the Central Issaquah plan and the mixed-use environments was the social public realm, right? And so if we haven't addressed that yet, I think that's a good thing, separate from what we're discussing tonight, but it would be good to have some clarity so there isn't confusion as folks go through development.
Does anybody have any questions of staff? Okay.
One more question in the sense of related to streets and from a long-term maintenance point of view is trees grow forever. And so the top side of trees are wonderful. The bottom side of trees, the roots that destroy sidewalks, streets and everything. And so do we have to have trees? I love trees, but do we have to have trees on streets as opposed to having a narrow landscape area with a bush that might be 4 to 5 feet high? might take a little bit more maintenance long term, but at least you won't have the root structure that's gonna, 20, 30 years down the road, as we build these, create a lot of more maintenance issues. And so I guess my question is, does it have to be trees? And if we can do bushes instead of trees, can we narrow the landscaping area to save some right away and still prevent, or still have some sort of greenscape along the street for visual and green buffer?
I think if you do switch from street trees to the smaller vegetation, yeah, you can make everything a little smaller width. But the city does have street tree requirements in certain areas of the city. And so that's one thing that we're balancing with some of these is we want to make sure that we're considering that full width with the typologies. And then when there isn't a requirement for the street trees, then everything can kind of get narrowed down. So you're not having to build a wider footprint.
So what type of streets require trees? Is it the parkway?
Off the top of my head, I can't.
Or maybe it is the core streets and the parkway, I guess. Core streets.
John or Thomas, do you remember which streets or corridors there are?
Well, the one thing I do remember is, I guess this wasn't for trees, but there's always a planner required in Central, but I do know that the landscaping part of the city code is in the land use code. And so whatever we have for street standards does need to comply with the landscaping part of the city code. And so without getting into a whole different can of worms, we gotta stay within that lane.
Okay, so what I would like to know, it sounds like people have had their questions, had a chance to ask their questions and they've been addressed at least, even if not fully satisfied. What I would like to know is, I would like to know what you all think. And before I ask, I'd actually like to go around and ask you what you think and why. But I also want to ask staff before we do that, because to me, it would be effective as an advisory board if we did come to an agreement and then we could share that agreement, what do we think and why, and pass that on to administration and to the Mobility Infrastructure Committee. If we can't come to an agreement, then that's also interesting, and that's where the why becomes interesting. So I do want to get to that discussion, and I think it might take a couple minutes. Luckily, it's our only thing on the agenda, so I want to take the time to do this, but
We have 3 of these, though, right?
we do have 3 of them, but yes, and I at the time here. But what I want to know is, are these really I know you provided alternatives. Some of them have more than one variable between the first and second one. For example, between the first and second one, you're not only swapping, but you're also changing the planner strip. Is that right? So you're making 2 changes between 1 and 2. Is it fair game? I mean, should our assignment be, you need to pick from these 3 and only these 3 as presented? And then if you can't, then whatever your reservations are? Or is it on the table to say, well, we actually really like this feature, and because it's not really clear to us whether there are viable alternatives that aren't on here, because obviously you're not gonna have every single combination, but that's, I guess, one of the questions before I ask each of us to say what we think and why. I would like to know if there's a reason we need to stick to ones in the way they're presented.
Yeah, great question, Chair. So I would say that, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I will say that there's infinite like you could iterate over this so many different ways. So for simplicity, there are 3 options before you. But looking at where we have added, there you could make value judgments for plus or minus any of these different inputs. So the administration is really excited about alternative number 2, but that's not to say that there could be other alternatives that come out of it. We would just want to make sure that we're respecting the minimum requirements for each and then playing around with the inputs. But So I guess I hope that answers your question. There's things we could change, but we feel pretty excited about number 2.
What I'm hearing is pick one of the 3, but we could also add a few comments, recommendations along with that selection.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Help ourselves.
For now, if it helps with the board's discussion, focus on, is option 2 good enough? If not, why? Does it need the wider space or wider right of way? If so, why? If 2 is adequate, do we want to stick with the internal components of what was designed from the central Issaquah plan? Or do we want to go the staff proposed approach of more complete streets with option 2? Just kind of to help with your comparing the 2. Because like Thomas said, we could talk about all kinds of different options, from the foliage to the type of surface treatment for.
No, we're not
pedestrian.
gonna get to that level.
But
I'm talking broad strokes.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. So at the higher level, that's how I think might help the board's discussion, comparing in terms of like giving staff what we're looking for.
So.
I think I got the answer to my question, but wait.
Okay, so the higher level, does that mean, do you want the bike on the street or do you want the
Right.
bike on the other landscaping? And that would be the higher level. And then we can talk about what we like with that.
Right, so let's do this, I'm hoping that someone's gonna volunteer, in a moment, I'm gonna start asking you guys to go around and say what you think, but I think we should start, let's start and assume that let's keep it simple to start with, and maybe it will be simple, maybe we'll all be of similar minds and it won't have to be more complicated, but let's start, if you could each just go around and say which option you prefer, which is the closest, and then why. And then we'll see where we net out with that, to see kind of what people are thinking. I'm gonna pick on Erica. Okay. But I don't have to pick on, does anyone else want to start? Okay, you want to start?
Yeah.
Okay, Jerry, why don't you start, and then we'll go this way. Yeah, okay. Sure.
So it's just what Thomas said, that 2, to me, seems like the best option, because we don't want to force developers to donate more right of way, and you'd have to go do that with option 3, and then option 2 is much safer for the cyclists. So, and that might be my bent, so I'm saying option 2.
So, Connie pointed out the impervious surface concern, and I would say I share that with narrowing the landscaping, and I sort of wonder, are there alternatives for the bike lane or the sidewalk? I mean, they're maybe too expensive to look at, but as including as a recommendation to trying to leverage those as, or the opposite of impervious surface, impervious surface. I think that could potentially even help some drainage just on the street, but also address an important concern that was brought up. I think for safety's sake, I certainly like the bike lane separated. Considering almost every option is 5 feet, it seems like that's actually all that's necessary. So I wouldn't propose widening the bike lane to 6 feet. It does. I'm always curious, how much roadway we're providing to a given portion of our roadway users. And so I have a little bit of some concerns there, but I'm not knowledgeable on what that is, so nothing else on that. I certainly don't want to narrow the road at all, but since I'm talking the car roadway, but since this is the same width and actually adds that little buffer area that I think will add in some comfort, because we're not right up against the parked cars. I think with that being said, option 2 is my top choice.
Awesome, okay. Okay, so I'll go ahead and go next, and I like option 2 the best. I really like the buffer idea, and I think that there's a lot of bang for the buck with space on the buffer. I don't necessarily, yeah, I am concerned about two things. One is just, it sounds like, I just did some looking at, it sounds like even though there's no change in the width in the central Issaquah plan, this is still greater width than what they have now. So there would be an increased road right of way at the time of the application. So I'm not entirely clear on why the sidewalks need to be as wide. My one main really, really strong concern, and I hear you that intersections are not part of the scope of this assignment, but I have great concerns. I've ridden my bike in this area for 25 years, and I've seen many, many situations where bicycles are separated, but then they're shot out at really dangerous ways at intersections. And I've seen that over and over again. And so I personally am fine with option one as a cyclist, but I understand that there's other people, and especially with the introduction of more e-bikes, you have more people that have less experience biking and they may have the speed, but that's all the more reason why that entrance into the intersection absolutely has to be designed, because the further you separate, I'd much rather line up right next to the car at an intersection so that they see me, and if they're gonna be making a right-hand turn, I'm right next to them and they see me. But if I'm 10 feet away, oh no, a parked car at 14 feet away, they might not see me, and I'm gonna shoot into that intersection in an unexpected place. So I don't know what the industry or the profession is saying about how to do that, but I can't go with option two without making that super, that's a big concern of mine. So I'll have to just assume, and I don't know if it's paint, I don't know if it's stripe lights
What
or.
Portland does is bring it out with green paint and they create a box in front of that lane so that bikes can accumulate there.
The box in the lane is usually not right next to the ones I've seen is right next to the lane of traffic though. This is 14 feet away or something. So you're out of sight, out of mind.
Oh, yeah, you have to zip before you get it, but it has to be painted or something that's very late.
Yeah, so that separation makes the cars forget about you and they don't expect to see you shoot out into the intersection.
So I guess that would mean with this, with 1 and 2, 1 also, does that mean that your turn lane would be right, if you're on the right side of this picture, the turn lane for the cars would be on the right side of the bikes going straight, and on this side, the turn lane would be on the left side?
I feel like the engineers of this world have figured out how to address my concern when I see option 1. I do that, that's kind of, I'm not worried about that. There's other reasons that option 2 is a good idea, but as we switch to this separated thing, I'm just saying that I just really want to make sure that that is addressed at the intersection stage, which I know is out of the scope of this assignment, but I can't help it.
Yeah, I'll just add that one of the things that I've been looking at, my group has, and it actually started with the Newport Way Maple to Sunset project, is the Massachusetts DOT has a really great manual for designing intersections for pedestrians and bicycles, and we're really starting to get some stuff from that. And so that's a whole nother conversation, but it's a really exciting one.
I believe it can be solved. I just have seen it missed so many times, and I just wanted to highlight the problem and just make sure that got recorded. And that's all I have to say about this. Did you want to?
You gave me some parameters to come here, and I'm trying to be patient.
Okay.
But I already have some hand grenades that I'm gonna throw in because of what I've heard, so I can throw them in now or throw them in later.
Just keep it in order.
I'm gonna keep it in order. Go ahead, Kristen.
I can go really quick. I like option 2 that has been presented to us. I like the great separation between bikes and peds. I share the concern about intersection, but that's not privy to our conversation tonight. And the one concern I do have about option number 2 are the parkways and reducing one of the lanes down to 10 feet wide. I feel like we need, even though I understand.
Are we just talking about core streets right now? You said.
Oh, I thought we were gonna do all of them at once.
Sorry, I thought we were just doing
Core.
core
We're never
streets.
gonna get through the conversation if
Core.
we.
I have very strong opinions about parkways. So.
I think we should try to get through this. I think we can do it. It's up to
Okay.
7:10.
4, I'm good with 2.
Okay.
I'm also good with 2.
Do you have anything to say about why that hasn't already been said? No is a perfectly good answer. Lightning round, go ahead.
Core number 2, and I think the tree landscape can either be recessed or it can be used for drainage, or it can be elevated either way, so it gives a couple options. I like 2 just because you're separating the bikes, and I agree with what you were saying as far as there's ways to design the bike coming out onto the street to merge with signing, painting, other ways of awareness coming up to the intersection. So, and that's included, I think the option 2 is the better options to keep the bike separated from the road. Or Amsterdam-ish.
Okay, see, that wasn't that long.
Or 2 or 3,
Uh-huh.
but let me throw the hand grenades in. I think I'm Dave Wagner for the record. I think I'm the only board member that drives both commercial buses, trucks, cars, and I'm a bike rider, as you well know. So, a couple of questions. When you look at the changes for 2 and 3, you notice that everything's lower. The bike lanes are lower, correct? Well, you've got a lot of people, seniors especially, that are gonna come from that sidewalk over to that area to catch transit. Transit's only gonna be able to get to those built-out areas so that we can pick up people. That's gonna pose a problem with that lower area. Those bikes will have to come up and then go back down. You cannot have uneven pavement there, especially for seniors and ADA people. The buses will, think of a bus as 96 inches wide. That's not mirror to mirror, that's just the body, 96 inches. Think of the bus as 60 feet. Even now building the electric buses, they're trying to get away from 40 feet and build articulated buses that are 60 feet. Why? Because they hold more people. They're more, you get more bang for the buck. Follow me? If we're gonna have buses here on either, I like them because they're safe. You get rid of the bicyclist right next to the bus or the truck. And it will be easier for the drivers to pick up people off of 2 or 3 than it will be off of 1. So I think it's safer. I like it, but the turns, right turns and left turns, especially for your commercial vehicles, definitely going to have to be reworked. The example I use is the example of Thomas, right?
Correct.
Thomas had with Holly. Well, no, it wasn't Holly. Sorry, it was Juniper? Maple, sorry. Maple. I'm thinking Target because that's the street. You think of that and you think of the right turn, but when you get down to where Target is, you got the roundabout. A 60-foot bus, a 60-foot truck cannot make that corner. It has to run its duals up and over the top. That's why they made it the way they made it. Some of the old roundabouts had planters in the middle, and all you did was you had damage to get those people around the corner. So, but that's for another discussion when we deal with our corners. 2 or 3, I'm okay. I prefer 3, but that also is 4 more feet.
Could you say why you prefer 3?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a safer design, especially for bicyclists and for pedestrians. Not too worried about the parking. You get those bicyclists away from the moving traffic. It's going to be much safer than that. But that's theory, because I know in reality they'll be out there. One thing I did want to correct. Yes, they paint them. Yes, they paint nice red lanes in downtown Seattle. It says bus only. until you're in a bus and you pull up beside somebody and they say, I'm just gonna be parked for a minute. My wife is coming out to get in the car. You don't know how many times I've heard that. Then
That's
you
a
gotta take
whole
the
nother
60,
discussion on curb space management.
then you gotta take the 60-footer out and around that person when it's painted red and it's a bus lane.
Yeah.
That's a pet peeve, but 2 or 3, I prefer 3,
Okay. Thank you.
but it's 4 more feet.
So it's, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna propose a motion. It seems like there's a clear, acceptable choice, at least for everyone, of 2. There's also shared concerns about intersections and especially around bikes merging. But it seemed like, at least as far as the feedback you're looking for, I heard everyone was at least okay with or in favor of 2.
I think it's useful, if we, I'm kind of wondering, it sounds like you're comfortable, you can live with 2. So we could unanimous, I mean, yeah, sure, I would entertain a motion. I would encourage us to keep it simple and have the memo that goes to the committee have a little more depth on the whys, both from obviously the administration will do that, but from the TAP's feedback.
I just think the Parkway is gonna drive actually more discussion.
I know that,
Is
but I-
Connie still, yeah, she's still on. So I addressed Connie's point in that one email. Also, there is no reason buses can't have routes on 2-lane roads. Absolutely, there's no reason. You can have them, except if the roads are thinner, narrower, you got a real safety concern with pedestrians, parked cars, and bicycles. So I think that addresses her point with option 2.
somebody wants to, if we can do it quickly, I think that we could, it would be stronger if we actually were unanimous, so if somebody wants to propose, or do we think that, I'm actually inclined, I think the fact that we have all said option 2 probably obviates, so we're looking for, makes it so we don't really need to necessarily have a motion. It might save time. Okay, let's move along, and get to the next part of your presentation. I think that you guys all had a lot of great reasons, and I think that's super helpful, and they weren't in conflict. So I would say they were, I think they can just harvest all of that. The staff, when they're writing our summary of our discussion, can harvest that, and they can look at the meeting, watch the meeting, and capture all that. And that we should move on. So why don't we turn it back over to Thomas, who's gonna walk us through the Parkway discussion, and let's make sure we focus our questions to staff, really pointed, and let's challenge ourselves to get everything we wanna say in a short way. When we ask our questions, and we get our answers.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Very good feedback. We really appreciate it. Awesome. So next we have the parkways. And again, this is another example. This is East Lake Sammamish Parkway, southeast 51st to 56th. And just to provide a little bit of description here, as you can see, so it's mostly a 5-lane wide road. And there's currently a multi-use path on the west side of the road, as you can see my cursor here. And so this path obviously is used by cyclists and pedestrians. There's also a sidewalk on the east side of the street that's also provided. There's currently no dedicated bus waiting area or bus shelter. So currently, transit users would have to essentially wait in the sidewalk without weather protection, which doesn't sound very fun. And there's really just no dedicated area to wait. So you're essentially clogging up the sidewalk as you wait for your bus. And so in the existing design, travel lanes are about 12 foot wide. And so, this is a great width for a bus, but again, a 12-foot wide road really would encourage drivers to speed possibly faster than the posted speed limit. So with this new parkway design, there'd be more focus on providing a better experience for pedestrians, cyclists, and transit users, while maintaining a comparable quality of driving experience for cars. So again, I'll just walk through the alternatives here for parkways. So the first alternative is, again, the central Issaquah design. This design provides wide sidewalks and landscaping, as well as other amenities. These are provided between the sidewalk and the bike lane. Cyclists are provided a bike lane which is located next to the number 2 or the outside lane. There's also a wide median which functions as both a left turn pocket at intersections as well as landscaping. This road is designed to carry high amounts of traffic, so the speed limit is meant to be around 35 miles per hour. And again, while there's a lot of good features about this design, some of the negative features that we have noticed here is that the design, again, might be uncomfortable for many would-be cyclists. This is because, essentially the road is, the speed limit is, 35 miles an hour. You're riding next to fast-moving vehicles. So as a cyclist, it could potentially be uncomfortable for many who might be interested in riding, but may find it a little bit uncomfortable. This road is also designed to have less access points. These are longer roads. The stretches are significantly longer than, say, the core street. So again, as a transit user, folks who might be wanting to access transit would need to walk further to get there, or potentially a cyclist who wants to access transit would need to ride further. So that is one of the downsides of this. The current configuration may not also provide transit shelters. There just really isn't the space for it to adequately provide a walking area as well as a transit shelter. And then other considerations are that an 11-foot travelway is pretty significant. Pretty significant for a passenger vehicle. You could potentially reduce that, as well as again, the wider lane could potentially mean faster moving vehicles. So in contrast, alternative number 2 seeks to again improve on the central Issaquah design to address the deficiencies that I just mentioned. And so option 2 represents the preferred alternative again, similar with the core street. And so with this design, again, we would be providing a wide sidewalk on one side of the street, and the other side would have a mixed-use path on the other. And this is actually what is currently out there for many streets. So this would again provide a comfortable accommodation for both cyclists and pedestrians. Next to the mixed-use path, this would be a flexible area that could be used for various amenities. So in this cross section here, we show a 9-foot area that is being used by a transit stop, and this 9-foot minimum for a transit stop, that is sort of the recognized minimum that was required to provide both access around the shelter as well as provide the shelter itself. And so other uses for this 9-foot could be, this could be landscaping, this could be other amenities, it could be like, just a bench, it could be additional sidewalk. So it's sort of a more flexible use of this area. Within the travel lane number 2, we would continue to have it at 11 feet, so no change there. We like this because it provides a comfortable width for larger vehicles that would be using this road. Some of those larger vehicles include buses, it could be other uses, but again, an 11-foot wide width is going to be accommodating for various types of users on this road. And the first lane, which is primarily used by passenger vehicles, would also provide an adequate space, but would be reduced to 10 feet in this case. In the median, we don't really need a 12-foot wide median, so we're proposing just reducing that by 1 foot, and then we pass that to the other users. An 11-foot wide median is perfectly adequate for left-turning vehicles. It's also a good space for any sort of landscaping that would be in the median. So we find that overall, the net result is that we are trimming in the right spots, we're adding where we should, and again, we're sort of adjusting the road to be more accommodating for more types of users. And alternative number 3, this is again the widening option. So this alternative would widen the total roadway by about 5 feet. This would be to essentially provide that bike lane option on both sides of the street, and would make the number 1 travel lanes a little bit wider. This alternative provides ample space for all users, but again, the net result is that we're increasing the minimum right-of-way width, which could potentially reduce development potential on private property. Okay, so I'll pause here again, and I'll take some more questions.
Go ahead.
So you mentioned parkways is 12 feet when you're talking about East Lake Sammamish, and then it says for the option 1, it's like the current, it's 11 feet for the travel lanes. And so I just wanted to clarify, is 11 feet, is that like, if we, like the things that are highlighted as parkways, is that what they are right now, 11 feet? Or are a lot of them actually wider than that?
I don't know specifically on the top of my head of all of them, but I know that specifically for that example, we did measure it, it was 12 feet wide.
Okay, so 10 feet is potentially a pretty significant, is it 2 foot, it's down from 12 in at least one case.
It is significant, but it is well within a reasonable width.
Okay. Which one are you talking about? Can you clarify? I heard the answer, but I.
Well, so the example that he gave with East Lake Sammamish was 12 feet.
Of what?
Of the travel lane for cars.
Gotcha, thank you. Any other questions? I have a question. Do you know how wide East Lake Sammamish Trail is on average?
12 feet.
I
12
think
feet.
it's 12.
Okay, thank you. Do we not have any other questions for them? Because I'd love to go through the same exercise. I know there were people who had lots of thoughts about the parkway. Oh, sorry, I can see you over there.
Maybe it's just a comment, but, so for option 2, you have a 7-foot pedestrian walkway and the 6-foot bicycle, and that, you were saying that's kind of like the mixed use. And so couldn't we be reducing that a little bit and adding extra width perhaps in the lanes?
Yeah, Jerry, that's a great comment. So this program that we're using, it's kind of hard to like show both cyclists and pedestrians on the same facility. So there is a line here, I'll use my cursor to show that. Yeah, this line here that you're talking about, this would in practice would be, it'd be one facility. That would be about 13 foot wide. And so,
Right, but
yeah.
And could
And
at least 12, or, like the Sammamish Trail.
yeah, it'd be roughly equivalent in that. Yeah.
The 13 feet is, or 11 or 12 feet?
So in this scenario, it'd be about 13 feet. And I believe what I think what we're saying is that the East Lake Sam Trail is about 12 foot. I'm sure it varies in different areas, but this would encapsulate that area.
We could save a foot there somewhere. I guess
Yes.
that's not much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right,
So
right now,
how-
the widths are just meeting the full width of the proposed right-of-way use, so it's just, it could be 12 feet, to answer your question.
Can I,
Yeah, please.
the median with a tree, does this have to be, it's 11 feet or 12 feet depending on?
It's also the turn.
Oh.
Yeah,
okay.
it changes
It's a
from.
turn
turn
lane
lane.
also,
I see.
not just a median, it's a
That makes
turn lane.
sense, why, okay.
Yeah, because you don't want the road to go narrow, go wide, go narrow every time the width changes.
Makes sense, didn't know if I'm thinking Fourth Street slower, it was like 5 tree. Okay.
So, let's start here and then go to there and then come back around over here, because I know you had a lot to say about this and I cut you off before.
Oh, it's okay. I actually don't have a ton to say. I'm in favor of option 2. My only caveat, I'd love to see a foot taken out of the mixed use path area and given back to driving lane 2. I feel like that's really important for transit, deliveries. There's a lot of cars that use that parkway, and so I think the more that we can facilitate ease and safety, the better.
I'm also good with option 2. Although now I'm wondering if the middle that is trees and then can turn into a turn lane. But didn't we just address that 10 feet is kind of the technical? So I guess, is that another option where we could grab a foot from if we needed to?
Because the larger vehicles sometimes use the turning lanes, we want the turning lane to be that wider too.
Still like to
So you're like 2 as is?
Yes.
Okay, someone, how about you, Tom?
I think I like to also, my only concern is there's the shared use path on one side. I still have to like cross over at the intersection. But I'd also like to see a foot taken from the median and a foot taken from the right side landscaping to add 1-foot lanes on instead of the 10-foot lanes.
Could you repeat that? I'm wondering if we, you would want to, just repeat that, please.
Yeah, Parkway 2, and I would like to see a foot from the median and a foot from the 9-foot landscape taken to provide 11-foot lanes on the inside lane, so all lanes are 11 feet.
Can I go back and ask where you wanted your extra foot to go? Same place?
same place.
So
drive-
you're,
drive
so
lane
we
2.
have 2 proposals on where to get it from, but they both are going to the same
Yeah.
spot.
Exactly.
Okay,
As long as lane 2 is 11 feet, I'm open
Okay.
to
where it comes from.
whatever
Gotcha.
makes.
Okay, so we have several suggestions on where it can come from. We've got 2 people that think it should. Okay, that's super helpful. Okay, anything else?
No, that's it.
Did you catch that all, Thomas? That seemed pretty.
I did, yeah, thank you.
Great, yes, okay. Dave, what about you?
I'm gonna stay with 2 or 3, I prefer 3, and I'm willing to buy off on what they just said with that 1-foot change. I do like the fact that those outside lanes should be 11 feet, especially for your commercial vehicles. It gives more, a wider berth for that inside lane to be able to get around the outside lane, especially if you're gonna throw bus stops. You think of Lake Sammamish Parkway, East Lake Sammamish Parkway, that really works well. Keeps that pedestrian and bicycle traffic away from the street, much safer. So, from the traffic circle to 56th Street, that's sometimes known as Darth Vader Parkway or the Indianapolis 500, because people don't obey that 40-mile-an-hour speed limit. And that's really difficult, especially if you throw in some bus stops, which will never happen because nobody gets off along there. I'm good with 2 or 3, I prefer 3.
If you don't mind me asking, what do you like about 3?
What do I like about 3?
Yes.
I like how you completely remove the pedestrians and the bikes off to the side. That's a really, really safe situation. And I like the fact that you're giving the commercial transportation state of the right one more foot. That makes a huge difference for buses.
11-foot lanes on both, all 4 lanes.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we go with the suggestion that Christy and Tom had in terms of trying to pull out
But if
the
you-
landscaping
if
and
you
put it,
take that 1 foot from the inside lanes, I'm not unhappy about that.
okay,
Because most buses realize that because they've got people on the right side, they're not gonna go over to that inside lane and have to cut back to pick up people. So, I really like that. I really like option 3, because it's got the wider streets. But you could take that foot away from the inside lanes.
correct.
And I'm not unhappy with that.
Thank you.
Jerry, what
I
about you?
have nothing more to add. Option 2.
What about you?
Well, I have some serious concerns about option 2. Hearing about East Lake Sandwich Parkway, I'm wondering about the other roads this would currently apply to. Are we, we're saying, 11 feet, it's the same, but it could be it's not really the same. It could be we're actually talking about a significant reduction in street width across our parkways. And I think another important thing to notice about the option 1 is because you have that bike lane on the same surface, you have actually a wider road when needed. And not saying a car should drive in the bike lane, but if you need to get around someone or something, whatever that may be, there's an object in the road, you have more width total on the same surface that the car can drive on. So in effect, option 1 actually has, when it's needed most, the significantly wider lanes than either of these other options. You have a curb on either side for option 2 and 3. That's a hard limit. So I have some concerns about reducing from, if it really is 12 feet, if that's what it is, I have concerns about reducing that down. At a minimum, certainly 10 feet seems way too small. If you have a bus that's stopped, you have another bus that needs to get around it. You're in a situation where that could be too narrow and you block up traffic. It also seems like you're not gonna have covered bus stops that often. So you could potentially take even more out of the sidewalk, because it's probably fine to have a 4-foot sidewalk, just a few places you have to walk around the bus stop, right? So if you say you narrow that to, you leave that as 9 feet, but you narrow the sidewalk to 4 feet, you really have a 13-foot sidewalk, except for where there is a bus. And I understand there's landscaping, but you get the landscaping take up less than 9 feet. So I think there's an opportunity to remove more without having an actual effect on the apparent width of the sidewalk, except just where there's a bus stop that sticks out. And so I think you could actually probably even pull more than just 2 feet back in to get to 11 and 11. I would say in general, whatever the current width is, I'm not in favor of reducing that. So if East Lake Sandwich is an exception and most of them are really 11 feet, okay. But if that's really the norm, then I'm not comfortable with what I've heard so far, being convinced that reducing those lane widths is actually a good idea. So I guess which option? None. I would say sort of a variation that's kind of beyond just picking one.
I appreciate that. What I want to know is, I see a couple of hands up, but what I want to know is, does anybody want to change their answer based on what you had to say? Or does anybody want to try to convince them otherwise?
Sure.
I mean, the delivery, go ahead.
Sure, concerned on a parkway as a bike rider, it rains a lot here. I've been to.
I'm sorry, what? Say it again, I
So,
couldn't understand.
sorry, as a bike rider, and it rains here a lot, so there's always rain in the road. You have 2 lanes that are 2% crossflow, so you have all the water coming over into the gutter lane, which is where the bikes are always put. So To me, it's a lot more risk to the bike rider that's riding on the street with the rainwater as opposed to being separated on a separate path. Or the rainwater. I do think the extra width is good, but I don't think it's the risk of an occasional occurrence where a bus or a truck might need to turn around as opposed to having a full-time safe on the separated. That'd be my concern with having the bike on that. With option, so I say with option too.
I have a quick question. Is I-90, are the lanes with the reconfiguration of I-90 through, are they 11 feet or 12? I thought they were reduced to 11, just to kind of give it a frame of reference.
On Interstate 90,
Yeah,
the lanes are about 15 feet.
15
No,
feet?
no, not on
I don't think
They're
they're,
12 feet during.
Closer.
No.
Did they narrow it going through?
For very construction, they narrow them to 11 feet, but otherwise it is.
Oh,
it's
for
just
construction,
12
for
feet.
construction, I see.
Otherwise they're 12 feet. So,
I think they're 12 feet.
Yeah, and I believe that East Lake Sam, south of 56th has 11-foot wide lanes. That north of 56th, which used to be unincorporated King County, that's where we get into the wider lanes. But in the section that we rebuilt back in 2016, those are 11 feet wide.
So good to have you here.
what section is
Jerry,
that?
Yeah, I just
What
wanted
section
to
is that?
point out with what Dave was saying,
56
that maybe
to
there's conflict now.
Swap City Road.
But
Oh, okay.
Dave was saying that, East Lake Sammamish Road in Issaquah was moving very fast because of the 12-foot lanes. And then everyone seems to be saying, and I agree, the narrower the lanes, the slower the drivers are gonna move. And so that would be a reason to be content with the 11-foot lanes. Or less.
you would hope,
Yes.
but it's not the case because any given day, you put a police officer down there with a radar gun, you're gonna have people doing 50 miles an hour at least. And it's a 40-mile-an-hour zone.
But there is documentation that when you narrow the road, the traffic does slow.
Correct.
So that is,
I agree.
that is, yeah. So I don't think I went, I'm actually kind of struggling a little bit. I thought you made some really compelling points. I think one thing that you're hearing from all of us is that it sounds like 11 feet. We don't want any, we're not recommending any 10 foot. So it sounds like option 2, but with the modification of increasing to 11 feet. So nothing is less than 11 feet. I would just say with regard to narrowing and making it less efficient for cars, I think it needs to be smooth, but I don't think it always needs to be fast. I think that traffic flowing is important, but I don't necessarily think, I think the absolute speed, I'd rather see people go 35 than 45.
I think my point is more so that this is, the no change is 11 feet. The change is shown as 10 or 11 feet. We're talking 11, as if there's actually no change. So if it is, in fact, 11 feet is common, then I'm okay with 11 feet. If 12 feet is actually common, and I just don't know, then I'm concerned that we are sort of overlooking what could be a pretty substantial change for the actual real world use of the road. So it's more of a concern because at least the example given was 12 feet. I don't know how representative that is of everything. I would go back to just the fact that I think that there is a difference between when you have a 22-foot curb to curb versus a 27-foot curb to curb. Just, I guess I don't really know exactly what that would end up meaning, but.
Go ahead.
What's East Lake Sammamish Parkway now? I think it's 12 foot. Each lane is 12 foot, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so
North of-
north of 56th, we have 12-foot wide lanes. South, we have 11 on the new section.
Correct. That's what I thought it was on the new section. After you get past 56, it narrows.
Right.
Doesn't slow the traffic, but it narrows.
It doesn't.
So just to be clear, I actually, the problem that I have with 2 is I just always rather see the bike separated from the peds. But So I actually kind of like 3, like you do. So I think what I'm hearing is that most people in the room are in favor of option 2, but not quite as, with a lot more reservations than we were with the core streets. And the reservations, I think you can probably summarize it. I'm not gonna try to summarize them, but I'm wondering if there's any new discussion. I don't think we necessarily need to make a motion and come to an agreement, but I do want to make sure that everything that we have to say is kind of summarized and that nothing is gone unsaid. Go ahead.
Just a clarification to maybe bring us back. So what we're now trying to do is set the typology of the road, correct? That's what we're trying to do, not what's out there now. We're now trying to say this should be the scheme. So,
Correct. It's that 20-year vision of what we want these corridors to be.
correct. Some roads would have to be widened, some roads would have to be narrowed, okay?
Oh, that's what that other.
So I looked at the 3 on the alternatives on these maps.
On some roads,
But it's basically what's gonna be our plan from now on, correct? So, with that in mind, my vote again would be 3 over 2, but I can live with either.
And but you would be fine with 2 if we're, staff kind of takes a look at widening those travel lanes.
Correct.
And blame them.
But I would, my vote would be for 3, but I could live with 2.
And my vote is for 3, but I can live with 2, and my reason is because I will always vote to separate bikes and peds. And I just never like it when they get put together, but East Lake Smash works okay, I mean, that trail works okay, so. But there's just a lot more on and off, like you said, and so if you're going to the business across the street, you're gonna have to go the wrong way for a while.
Yep.
Anyway, so that's my concern, but I can live with that. But have we said all that is to be said about this? I feel like we kind of summarized and I feel good about, I'm hoping you, Thomas, feel like, I'm sorry, I was starting to wrap up. Slow streets is a lot fewer things. Are we ready to move on to slow streets?
Yes.
Okay.
Just a time check, we got about 15 minutes.
Yep.
Those streets should be.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I think we're actually good on time because the next alternative, there's really just.
Point of order. Have we given them the vote that they are looking for tonight
Gave them contact.
On parkways?
on Parkways?
Yes,
Have we given on core streets?
yes.
We didn't make a formal motion, but we were clear enough, I believe, to that we've fulfilled our duty to provide advice as an advisory board, I feel like.
That satisfies my point of order. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I've been taking notes. I think I've encapsulated what was said.
Clarification from the chair, we did start about 15 minutes late, so late. Are we wanting to end at 9? Or,
I would love to end at 8.
Or 8, sorry. 8 o'clock.
Yeah, and I think we can do it.
It feels that late, so.
More because it's not a matter of how long we sit here. In the meeting, it's more a matter of what time
Okay.
we
All right,
depart.
just
So
wanted-
that is the
just
goal.
wanted-
But let's see where we go.
Yeah, I feel good about 8. I think we can do it. And so here's an example of a slow street, what it looks like today. So this example is Rainier Boulevard North, northwest of Holly Street to Dogwood. So this road has sidewalks on both sides of the street and plenty of landscaping. Travel lanes are kept to a reasonable width to accommodate light amounts of traffic. There's also some parking on street, as you can see here. And there's some traffic calming measures that are sort of outside of the frame here, but you can see there's some little, I believe these are like chicanes or bulb outs here. So it kind of narrows down the road. So it's a calm street, very, very pleasant to walk on. Because the lane widths are narrowed and the traffic has been calmed, cyclists are able to take the lane and just sort of ride their bike down here pretty comfortably if they wish.
It's not calm at rush hour.
Oh,
I
maybe not.
I drive
I've never
50
been
miles
there.
an hour when I'm coming home that way to kind of help block all the cars that try to cheat. Take that and bypass Front Street, so
Yep.
that's a little bit of personal traffic calming.
I love personal traffic calming.
Yep. So, okay. So moving on here. So with the slow streets, the administration really just has the status quo that we're proposing. So we really like the design flexibility that's provided within the central Issaquah standards. So we're proposing to actually keep it as is. But for simplicity, here's just a mock-up that sort of better describes what the requirements are. So
Your volume just dropped. Chris.
oh, can you hear me now? Sorry. Okay. So yeah, again, we're proposing to keep the central Issaquah standards as is. We really liked how they provided for the street, and I'll just sort of walk through what the existing requirements are and in a little bit more detail. So as you can see, the sidewalks are wide. They're buffered from the street by landscaping. We really like that there's good flexibility in design here. So option A is one way, and it's basically like the no parking option. So and option B has parking. So in this standard, parking is optional. So B represents the optional parking, and A represents a street that has no on-street parking. So again, no change in this. We really like the flexibility. This road provides traffic calming. The speed limit is reduced to be around 20 to 25 miles an hour. This slow speed allows for cyclists to comfortably take the lane and ride through the street.
Dogwood.
So yeah, I guess that sort of ends the typologies, but I will ask for if you have any feedback on this.
Does anybody have any concerns about the slow streets? I think it's a, oh, go ahead.
So the question is is it situational, or you could do either 1A or 1B? So it's not all going to be 1A or all 1B, but primarily 1A works and the other areas 1B works. But the concept is the same between. It's really kind of situational design in a way based on, okay.
Actually, Rainier Avenue is both 1A and 1B.
Oh,
If you look at it.
And that's the
total-
situational aspect, taking into account kind of the land use and the right-of-way widths.
My vote on this one's gonna be easy.
why'd you start?
I think they'll change in 1A and 1B because they are working now. We live on one that works. I lived on that street before it got changed to be a 1B, and it didn't work. Now it's working, with the exception, you still get the speeders on Dogwood, as you well know.
Yeah, but it's not
Tom
too
and I know how
bad.
to drive out there.
It's not too bad.
No,
It's
and
not bad.
bicycling is fairly safe for me on 1B. I feel safe, except that damn corner on Dogwood and Newport.
Yeah, that's another discussion.
Dogwood.
Do you have any, are you
I
on the
love
same
Dogwood.
page?
I remember when the Nutcracker
No.
house used to be there.
Okay, are you okay with this?
Oh, yes.
For a second.
I'm not sure people remember the Nutcracker houses, but yes, I'm good with A and B.
I'm not gonna, yes, I'm good with it. I do, was 5 feet the minimum for the planters?
5 foot's the minimum.
5 foot is the minimum, okay. I mean, yeah, I'm not gonna change it, I'm just wondering like why it's not bigger. But if it's better for the landscaping, maintenance over time.
It's just dependent on the width of the total right-of-way in terms of like what we look at. And not everywhere is gonna have a street tree, so some of those bits are gonna change to have a smaller vegetation.
It's safe to walk down now, didn't used to be safe.
Doing, yeah, Kristen,
I support it.
good. What about you? Yeah, Jerry?
No comment.
Okay, good.
I was wrong, we did it.
I know.
Way to
Well, I
go,
know.
guys.
Oh, nothing yet.
We do have a couple of announcements though. So does that, with that, are we ready to conclude the street typologies?
Yeah, I'll just conclude real quick if you give me 30 seconds. I just wanted to tell you what's coming up next. So we'll be providing your feedback to the Mobility and Infrastructure Committee in winter 2023. So after the new year. We'll then just incorporate this into the final version of the street typologies, which will be updated with the Public Works street standards in spring or summer 2023. That's it for me.
Can you make sure to email me and Julian when that meeting is scheduled so we can recruit one of us, if possible, to attend?
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's see, I closed my agenda. I know we have a staff report. I have a very brief chair report. It's 7:55, we're doing good. Does somebody have the agenda open? What reports am I missing?
Board work plan first.
Oh, board work plan first, thank you. Let's go, is that part of the staff report? That's a staff item, okay. Just somebody gonna be making a comment about the meeting? I know
Yeah,
Isabel had
so-
to leave. Is somebody else tag teaming for her?
I'll do my best. So I don't have the exact plan, but we've got a lot of stuff coming in the first quarter that's very timely because we're trying to do two things. One, the city's going to be updating the 6-year capital improvement plan. And so we're wanting to get the ITS projects and the transit projects into the 6-year transportation improvement plan. And so we're going to be working on that. And we also need to talk about the Northwest Sammamish Road non-motorized project. And so it looks like we'll most likely have 2 meetings in January and try and schedule a special meeting.
And I had a lot of discussion with Isabel today about the date of that, and the only date that works is either January 30th or 31st. I can't make the 30th, but if everybody else can, the 31st, and that's right back to back, like 6 days after this regular meeting. There wasn't a lot of choice. And so I guess you don't have to answer right now, but we're hoping that people will be willing to have an extra meeting in January so that we can get through a little more material.
So our regular meeting would be January 25th,
Correct.
fourth Wednesday. So now we're gonna add the additional meeting, the 30th or 31st.
That's what we're proposing, if people are willing and able. I think it's the first time people are hearing about it, so I'm not really expecting an answer, but we can't wait till the 25th to find your answer, so you'll get an email presumably from Isabel, seeing if that date works.
I can do either date.
Was the next thing staff report?
I don't have anything for the staff report.
The RTS plan objectives memo is linked underneath the staff report.
Did you, I think that was just for our information, is my understanding. I do have a really brief chair report, and was there, sorry, we didn't have agendas printed and I didn't bring that.
It's, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to say that, I want to remind us that we did just adopt new rules and regulations, section 5, for our tab regarding virtual attendance. And while it is allowed, a quorum in person is required. Virtual attendance is allowed, a quorum in person is required with some exceptions. Erica's going to be in Olympia during the entire legislative sessions, which means the rest of us need to make a special effort to attend in person. And we value everyone's contributions, and I'm hoping that you'll agree that we need to kind of lean in and support each other when we can. Of course, we're volunteers, but we need to kind of hold each other accountable and make an extra effort to be here, even though virtual, we're in this kind of in-between world. Also, there is, it says a requirement, I'm not sure how that gets implemented or enforced, but that you mention it to, I guess, staff, or it'd be nice to mention it to me, but staff, I guess, 5 days in advance if you need to be attending virtually. And then, so I just wanted to kind of remind us about that and just try to help each other out by not trying to be the one that gets to be virtual when we have one of our valued members that has to be in Olympia that whole time. So, yes, I'm hoping that we'll have a high compliance rate with this new section, and that's all I have to say about the chair report. With that, I think, am I missing anything? I keep looking for Isabel, but I know she had to leave early this evening.
Youth report, we have no youth.
I'm sorry?
It's a youth report, we have no youth report.
Right, okay. Yeah, don't forget everybody, if you can think of people that would be good on our board, applications will be due in February. Imagine the announcements will come out soon
Usually they come out probably around the end of January.
for a February due date.
I don't think they're due in February, are they? They're usually due a little bit later, because the terms don't start till May.
I know, I thought they were due in February and that but maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, it's coming up and it'll come up fast. And
Yeah,
we need more
Isabel will let you know full time.
I've just been trying to get us to work in advance to really fill those seats.
When I was on the cemetery board, we used to have the date that we would, by our name, that we would drop off, what our end date was. Can that possibly be something that we could add to the transportation board? Example, I think I fall off on 2024.
It's on there, it's on the
Oh,
website.
is it?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Year 2023. Oh,
Yes.
so you gotta re-up?
Just disregard what the Alzheimer's guys said.
Yeah, it looks like the vacant position and your position come up in 2023, so hopefully you'll
2022?
3. So you will, we're hoping that you'll submit an application to serve again.
Okay.
I'm hoping that, I can't speak for the board. With that, I think that we're adjourned. Look at us.
So, the Nutcracker House, this